Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your ticker boom boom. Mike Bloomberg immolated himself on the debate stage update, along with some coronavirus. We have some news in both regards. First off, let's talk about this debate. Oh my, holy crap! There is not. I don't think there's any possible way for Bloomberg to recover from what happened last night. I think he's done. And as much as I dislike Elizabeth Warren, she took him out and back behind the outhouse, lit him on fire, and then flensed the remains. I mean, holy God. You know, it was relentless, but the worst part of it was accurate. And he had no response. And that I think is the biggest problem. Never mind that he started making noises about not releasing tax returns and things like this, which of course the Democrats have been all over Trump about. And that's a serious issue for them. Now, I personally think it's absolutely outrageous that it is considered necessary that a candidate for president of the United States essentially put their entire financial life as seen by the IRS on display going back for some number of indeterminate years, and that's the price of standing up there and saying you want to be president. It's complete bullshit. All right, the reality of the situation is what this is an attempt for your opponents to go pick through whatever you've done financially over the last 10 or 15 years or however many years and try to find things that they don't like so that they can skewer you with them. The fact of the matter is it shouldn't matter, but this is, yeah. What we really had was a WWE kind of body slam sort of ginned up thing. Bloomberg walked into the ring totally unprepared for this. He got a table over his head about 30 seconds into the debate. He never got up again. You can run all the ads you want, but you're not going to get away with this. And the worst part of it is that this debate and Bloomberg's responses and the attacks coming from especially Warren are going to be used by every other single campaign. It's going to happen. It's going to happen repeatedly. And that's going to be a big problem. Okay. Warren, without a doubt, won the debate last night. But I don't think it matters. I don't think it's going to change outcomes for her. But she did what she had to do, which is to find some way to get out from that pack of four. All right. And that was important to her. And boy, oh boy, did she get it. And she had a unique capacity to do it because she's a woman, which is that's one of the groups that Bloomberg has a huge problem with. And he had those NDAs turned around and shoved right up his ass. I ran a company for a long time, folks. I'm not exactly new at the game when it comes to firing people and things like this. In fact, I used to fire people all the time. It was kind of a blood sport around my office. If you came in and tried to work for me and you were incompetent, or you decided that you'd rather come to work drunk, or you misrepresented what you could do, which an awful lot of people do. There's an awful lot of resume puffery and puffery during interviews and stuff. Boy, were you in trouble fast, because you'd get caught and there were no second chances when you got caught. If you told me you could do a particular job and you really could not, you'd be out on the street immediately. I absolutely no qualms about canning people. If you decided that you'd like to go out on Sunday night and get trashed and call in so-called sick on Monday, well, you know what? If you're in a line job where you actually have to be there because I rely on you to be part of covering a phone pool or whatever have you, you either had a doctor's note that said that you were legitimately ill, or you were going to get written up for that. And after a couple of those, you were gone too. So, I mean, the standards were pretty clear, but I never asked anybody to sign a non-disclosure agreement on the way out the door. On the way in, if you were going to have possession of material information that could be used by my competitors, well, yeah, I mean, NDAs are part of the game. But on the way out there, after I'm about to fire you, are you kidding me? I mean, what an NDA in that situation says is that I'm bribing you not to sue me. How about don't do things that I could sue you for, that someone could sue me for in the first place, then we don't have those kinds of problems. Uh, and that Bloomberg won't release these women who claim that they were abused from these NDAs now, years later, probably long after the statute of limitations has run. In other words, he couldn't be sued. The only value that they have at this point would be to go after him politically. Is fairly decent evidence that there's some smoke there. Now, whether or not there's any fire, I don't know. But this was a point that he just got frickin' hammered on. That essentially he's trying to buy the nomination, but he's doing it on a major problem. And then in the stop and frisk thing, listen, frankly, he's right. All right, which makes that one such a monster. There's not a thing he can do about it. The idea that you don't put aggressive police tactics in the places where people can be identified as criminals at a higher than normal rate and use that identification as a means to try to find out if they're criminals. If you actually want to solve crimes and cut down the crime rate, that's laughable to not do that. And yet, the virtue signaling nonsense out of the Democrat Party is that you can't do that because that's discrimination. It's wrong. We shouldn't allow it. Da, 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 da. Hey, listen, I'm sorry. If you want to see the actual numbers, look at the FBI's UCI stats. The facts of the matter are that young black males are overrepresented in homicides by a ridiculous percentage compared against their percentage in the population. Or go over to Hey Jackass and look at the stats for Chicago. And if you think this doesn't apply in a city like New York City, you're wrong. It does. So, and yet this is the biggest problem that Democrats generally have when it comes to government. Democrats will say that you can't apply this kind of filter because it's discriminatory. So what that means is, think about this, folks. Black people are what, 13% of the population, or 14%, 15%, whatever. But in cities like Chicago, they're about a third. Okay? Now, I can't speak to New York because I've never lived in New York, but I lived in Chicago for quite a long time. And I still follow Hey Jackass. All right? And I still have looked at the demographics in some detail because, again, I lived there for an extended period of time. I lived in the Chicagoland area for 13 years. Some of it, the first part of it, working for somebody else as a wage slave, the normal kind of thing, and then running a company. And that firm, when I ran it, was inside city limits. First at 1300 West Belmont, which is the Lakeview neighborhood, very close to Wrigley, and then downtown at 2 Prudential Plaza, which is the north end of the loop, right on the north end of Grant Park. Right? Suite 2625, by the way, 2 Prudential Plaza. And so, 312-803-MCS1, yeah. Yes, if you actually did things like this, you still remember them, 20 years later, 25 years later, you could still tell everybody what your business address was because you were there for a long time and you got a lot of mail there. Okay. Here's the thing. About a third of the population is black, about a third is Hispanic, and about a third is white in Chicago, approximately. Now, neighborhoods are stratified. They do not represent the third by any stretch of the imagination. And then there's the other representation, less than 5 Asian, whatever. All right. Here's the reality, though. If you want to actually address crime, you're going to have to put the cops in majority black and Hispanic neighborhoods. You're going to have to put more cops there. Why? Because that's where the crimes are being committed. And let me point something out. It is not racist to say this, number one. It's a statistical fact. Number two, it is the black people and the Hispanic people that are having those crimes committed against them. So anyone who wants to scream racist in such an environment is a pig. You actually are in support of black people being murdered. You're in support of Hispanic people being murdered. Murdered, robbed, raped, whatever. Okay? That's what you're in support of. Because the victims of these crimes are most frequently minorities as well. The idea that somehow it is racist to say that black people, young black males specifically, shoot people at a ridiculously outsized proportion to their representation in the population is a fact. And furthermore, most of the time, the people they shoot are other young black males. Unfortunately, their marksmanship sucks because they're mostly gangbangers, and those gangbangers are not at all interested, nor is it legal for them to go to the range and practice. So they end up killing young black boys and girls that have nothing to do with criminal acts because they suck at marksmanship. They're trying to shoot another gangbanger, and instead they hit little Susie that's walking to school. You know, are we ever going to actually tell the truth about this kind of thing? We're not. But you know what? Warren took Bloomberg out back, bent him over the outhouse desk, and stuck it in him. She put a big strap on him and let him have it, and scored a huge number of points with these kinds of attacks. A huge number of points. Now think about this. This is considered a huge win for Warren. And yet, what is her answer to this criminality in these cities? It's to let it go on. Or worse, spend 3 times as much as you otherwise would. Because if you blanket the entire city with police officers at a level sufficient to suppress the crime, and you don't put them where the crimes are, which just happen to have a demographic tilt to them as well, you're going to waste a huge amount of money, an absolutely enormous amount of money, which the government doesn't have. You already have a funding crisis and collapse coming, at least in Illinois, from pension costs and things like this, and you're going to try to actually address this criminality problem without being targeted. Look, I don't like Bloomberg. He's an ass. But whether you like it or not, he went where the facts were with this. It's going to cost him his campaign, and it should, because, look, the guy should have stood up and owned it in exactly this way. The problem is you can't run as a Democrat if you do that. Right? You can probably run as a Republican, but you can't run as a Democrat. Anyway, Bloomberg was a huge loser. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that, you know, everyone, if you look at this, people are saying, you know, Sanders was a huge loser. I don't know about this. The one thing, they tried to go after him bigly last night about medical records and the cost of Medicare for all. The cost of Medicare for all we know is a huge problem. In terms of releasing medical records, again, I'm sorry. Look, that the guy had a heart attack is public fact. All right. If you won't vote for him for that reason, then don't. I think the question to have for any of these people, I don't care who they are, especially all these older folks, which, by the way, is essentially all of them, at least all that are left in the game. Who's the VP? You always ought to be thinking about that. Is it acceptable if you've got somebody who's old, if they fall over dead during their term and have the VP? I don't know. A butt plug. I don't know. I don't think he did anything one way or another, to tell you the truth. And between Klobuchar and butt plug, they kind of sort of went after each other. But you know what? I just didn't see anything going on in either one of them that meant anything. And frankly, the other thing that I think is crazy is that Biden has done absolutely nothing. He got up there. He got up there on the stage and he did nothing. And this is, you know, we see the early parts of the caucuses. It's going to be this week. We're going to see the early results and then final results, I guess, Saturday. But, you know, Biden seems to be basically banking on South Carolina. And I don't think that that's going to get him anywhere. I think he's in a shitload of trouble. Frankly, I think his campaign is over after South Carolina at this point. Although he's kind of likely to hang on and try to, do his thing. All right. Bottom line, there's nobody up there who actually showed that they could take on Trump. But if you want a winner last night, I don't think it was even close. The only person who did anything worthwhile is Warren, and she did it by destroying Bloomberg. He can spend all the money he wants, but he's not going to recover from this because every one of the rest of the people up on that stage are going to use his stuff and the attacks on him in campaign ads for the rest of the nominating season. He's done. You ought to take the money he spent and just fold his tent and go home. It was expended. It's gone. It was wasted. It's over. All right. New problems with the coronavirus. First off, the Chinese are attempting to claim from the numbers that are out now that at least through yesterday that there's been a dramatic flattening over the last 3 days. I'm not believing it. Secondly, we now have reports. The first there have been 2 deaths now associated with the people who were quarantined on Diamond Princess. This is not a big surprise. I've heard all the people say that Diamond Princess was not a successful quarantine. Oh, yes, it was. It was a very successful quarantine. They put all the sick people together and stopped them from. I know you didn't want to hear that, right? That's kind of nasty, but it's the truth. And the people who stay on that ship and actually didn't get off. I mean, now I guess they're going to evacuate the entire ship. They're going to get completely let the people off. Several of the people who have been brought back to the United States had tested positive. But here's another thing that's interesting. Are you actually this is a complicated situation. What if you are, let's say that you test positive on a test kit for this, but you never develop symptoms. You do 14 days in quarantine. You have no symptoms, but virologically you test positive. Well, that means your body built antibodies, fought off whatever level of infection you had, and you never became symptomatic. In other words, it didn't get you sick, but you got it. All right. Now, did you get immunity conferred by this to some degree? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows at this point. But it is an interesting point. The other thing is that apparently there are reagent problems with the test kits, and as a result, many of the tests are false negatives. In other words, they're not detecting actual virus when they're supposed to be. May I ask where the reagents came from? Could we have somebody do a little investigative journalism and tell us where that came from? Why are we getting reports about bad test kits and yet nobody's talking about where they were manufactured, by whom specifically? Can I have the names of the firms responsible for the bad reagents? And why is it that we are accepting medical tests that are defective? Folks, if you have, and we're not talking about 1 or 2 here either. There is, the reports in the media are that 1/3 of these may be defective. Would you accept a car if 1/3 of the time it was the vehicle was defective? Didn't start. 1/3 of the time. Holy crap! No, because it didn't have an engine in it. You got to be kidding me. And yet that's the kind of thing that we're seeing here. I'm stunned. Secondly, I don't believe that the numbers coming out of China, I think they're, it's just BS. We've passed 2,000 deaths. We've now had, but like I said, we've now had a couple that have been reported as from infections that happened on the Diamond Princess. The data that we are getting implies a few things, though, which is pretty bad on one hand, and it's kind of good in another. One of them is that it appears that if you're 80 or older and you get this thing, you're in a hell of a lot of trouble. All right. The death rate among people 80 or over appears to be very high. All right. Compared against an ordinary flu, ridiculously high. So, I'm going to be a little macabre here. Wouldn't that just be an absolute boon to Social Security and Medicare? If something like that was If you had a whole bunch of old people that can't work anymore and are just a quote-unquote drain on society, so as they claim, wouldn't killing them be great? If you could selectively target people to... I don't think this virus was genetically engineered to kill old people, okay? Don't take this that way. I know some people probably will, and I'm sure I'll get some comments about that. But what a fortuitous coincidence. The thing that's interesting is that what is this? Why is transparency and data so important coming out of places like China, which we're not getting and we're not going to get? Just forget it, okay? The Communist Party, these people, communism generally, not only must be rejected, these people need to be economically destroyed. What they've done here, if this was an accidental release from their level 4 lab due to carelessness, which it probably was, I would put the probability greater than 50%. All right? That doesn't mean it's a bioweapon. It just means they're careless, which doesn't shock. If, in fact, that's what happened, and I think that the evidence is fairly strong to support that, then there is a huge problem here, especially if gain of function was part of this, and it probably was, if that is what happened. And look at what it's doing now. It looks like what it's doing is essentially selectively targeting older people. Not because it was designed that way, but because that's just how it works out. You got a weaker immune system, with age, all kinds of bad things happen as you get older, folks. I don't know, man. I'm not exactly sure how to quantify all this right now. But I will say this. No part of what I'm seeing gives me any kind of confidence. All right? I'm not ready to pull up the welcome mat at the house and bolt the door and say nobody comes in or leaves. The perimeter is basically at the road. Anything is delivered. Hey, we take it out, we lay it out on the street and let the sun irradiate it for 12 hours or whatever, because UV is a really good viral disinfectant before it comes in the house. I'm not ready to go to that level, right? But the idea that China is going to somehow contain this thing and restart their economic miracle, bullshit. They are not. But I would like a lot more demographic information, a much better quality of reporting in terms of the deaths, the illness rates, and things like this. I am, again, folks, R0 is not a constant, okay? And if we have people who have tested positive, this is very important. If we have people in the United States, and it appears that we do, who tested positive for the virus, okay, remember, you get two kinds of false reports out of a test. Your false negatives are the ones that kill people because you think that everything's fine, and it's not. False positives are a damned annoyance, but you shouldn't get false positives out of a viral test, because how does that happen? Okay, you're looking for something that has to be present. The reaction cannot occur without, so there would have to be something that would mimic it. Let's assume that that's not the case. The most common false report is a false negative, and with regards to bad reagents, that's what happens. But assuming that those are true positives, that there actually was virus in that person's body, they get the test, they have a positive result, they get quarantined, they don't get sick. Okay? Realize that those people count as confirmed infections, and yet they never got ill. Now, if that is the case, what is the real R0? Because what is R0? Okay? So you need to define it. Is R0 I would test positive for the virus, or is R0 I got sick? If I can get a positive, think about this, folks. You're exposed to the common cold and other viral and bacterial agents every single day. If you have a test that's sensitive enough to detect all of that, and it's run on you, you might come up positive for any of those things, but you don't get sick. Are you a confirmed case? Be very careful here with your definition of R0, okay? The one that has to be used, the only one that's legitimate, is you get actually ill. The other thing is, if you get the virus In other words, you have a positive test, but you don't get ill. Does that confer some level of immunity? Because if it does, then we've got a very interesting situation brewing here. This thing, if those people get into the community, and if the majority of people in younger age groups are asymmetric positives, that is, they're never symptomatic. So you're asymptomatic at the time of the test, and you stay asymptomatic. So you're an asymmetric positive. Symmetric positive would be a person who's positive and gets sick at some degree. Some degree, all right? You run a fever, you get a cough, whatever. But if you're an asymmetric positive, if you gain immunity from it, we want asymmetric positives because that interrupts the transmission chain. There is so much data we don't have, and this is all a consequence of the CCP. This country and its government needs to be embargoed 100% right now, permanently, economically, socially, politically, on a travel basis, period. Don't let them in here. The entire Western world needs to look at a Chinese passport as a useless piece of paper. There is a great deal of information, not just related to the origin of this virus, that we need in order to be able to figure out what the effective things to do are. Otherwise, if this thing is 5, 10, 20, 100 times more efficient at killing old people, those 80 plus, as younger people, and the data appears to say that it might be, then all it takes is for a few little spies to get over here into an old folks' home or anywhere else. Hey, how about the villages in Florida? Holy crap. All right? Do you think that there aren't some ham-fisted or malicious governments that might... I'm not saying something's created, but... Gee, what a fortuitous coincidence. That has to be stopped. And the only way we can do it, the only way we can know whether or not that's a factor and it's something that we need to look at and address, is if we have the information, and right now we don't. Something to think about, folks. I'm your ticker guy, and that's how it is.